Hi, I'm Padma, first name on the author list, and as the title of our presentation suggests, I'm going to talk about imitating tennis players today. So, tennis at the moment sort of makes use of a lot of high-level stats, game-level stats, that don't fully describe the reality of tennis, where a player has to make split-second decisions that can have impacts, 1, 2, 3, 4 shots down the line. And as I mentioned, stats are very high level at the moment, and they really focus on outcome more so than effort and intent. So we're not really exploring why a tennis player made a decision, whether that was the right decision to make. And stats can be displayed in really nice ways like this. It gives you a great overview of what happened in a match. But the real problem with that is that if we want to gain any more insight, we need to handcraft features, we need to handcraft filters to understand what really happened. And something that Infosys has been doing recently with tennis to improve high-level understanding is incorporate AI into this. So specifically in this case, the goal is to say, here's a shot coming in. Can we figure out how a player is going to react? How do they generally react based on their history? And that's exactly the question we're going to answer now with imitation learning, and figure out how we can incorporate that and improve it with a feature like this. So here's a classic French Open sort of in-match play. I've blocked out the plays quite intentionally. Player on the near side is hitting a forehand from center baseline. Question is, where is he going to hit it? And the arrows show very plausible areas where the ball could land. Without any more information, we can't really say much more than this. So if I reveal the players now, Dominic Thiem and Rafa Nadal, Thiem's on the near side, about to hit the forehand, Nadal's on the far side. Right off the bat, I can say that Thiem's probably going to go for Nadal's backhand. He's going to hit to the left because Nadal's forehand is a monster. He does not want to deal with that. He's seen Federer fail too many times for too many years to do that. And the data absolutely reflects this. So marginalizing of the players against the average opponent, Thiem sort of has a pretty balanced hitting nature on either side of the court. But against Nadal, he almost exclusively hits Nadal's backhand. Then if I add more information on top of this, in this case I'm revealing the score, 30-15, can we make any more inferences on top of that? At this point I want to define some terms, so high win pressure and high lose pressure. High win pressure is at game point where the player of interest, Thiem in this example, if he were to win, he's going to end up winning the point. Otherwise, high lose pressure, break point, Thiem loses, he's lost the game. So with that, again, looking at the data, it supports that there is some difference. For low pressure shots and high win pressure shots, placement changes slightly. What does change though is the speed of the shot. Thiem tends to hit broadly a bit faster whenever he is under high win pressure because, well, he wants to win and he can take that risk. So I want to shift focus slightly to a high level idea now and talk about errors. So if you know anything about tennis, the stat reported is the unforced error, where a player makes an error on a typically sort of routine rally ball that they otherwise should and would have successfully returned. Now, the thing they don't tell you is that there are many, many forced errors in the game as well. If you look at the data for the French Open over the past few years, there's an equal number of unforced errors as there are forced errors. And some 70% of points end up in an error. And ignoring that, absolutely, when looking at errors, means we're just ignoring a ton of really important data. Now, shots themselves are pretty complex. So over here on the right, ball velocities are for Djokovic, his forehand specifically. So shots obviously consist of, you need to decide placement, you need to decide speed, the spin, the kind of spin, how much spin he wants to put on it, how high it's going to go above the net, how much of a banana the shot art looks like. And our goal with imitation is to describe the intent behind a shot, especially in the case of unforced errors, whether we can figure out what a player is doing, ignoring the fact that the error itself is due to subpar execution. Does the player have the right idea? The data we're using is from the French Open, Hawkeye data, with information on ball position, velocity, acceleration, player positions. Is further annotated with things like the current score and the classification of which shot a player has hit. And obviously things like spin as well are part of this. And so modeling tennis as a Markov decision process where the current action is conditionally independent of previous states given the current state. We're assuming that all rallies, all trajectories present in the data set are experts, because again, imitation, that's exactly what we want to do. And really with that, I'm going to go straight into how we're doing stuff. So here on the left, sort of an overview of what our data looks like, what a state vector looks like. Ball information at various stages, sort of temporally arranged and concatenated. Additional information is going to be game score, shot classification, and so on. So we've got a mix of continuous and discrete features there. And over here on the right is the model we're using. We're using a GAN-style approach. The focus here is on the generating discriminator, which is a classic actor-critic architecture. We're representing players as embeddings, borrowing sort of from language modeling. This allows us to learn a latent representation of a player, and in particular, the style of the player. And then we can sort of analyze that down the line. And again, borrowing from language modeling, we're also incorporating some historical context into this by looking backwards at a player of interest previous shots and sort of suggesting what they might in fact do. Jumping to the results, qualitatively, over here on the right, the top diagram is a sort of a response map, if you will. The red line indicates the incoming ball. The blue line is the ground truth hit by the player. The yellow star is the ground truth bounce location. We can fit a heat map over the bounce locations, and just below that, distribution of the speed. The red line indicates the ground truth speed. We can sort of do a bit of quantitative analysis. Probably the most interesting one that we've done is this little plot here, which shows the distribution of errors when the ground truth is an error versus a non-error. More or less what we expect, generally with non-error shots that are in ground truth are in. We see a lower error than for shots that are truly errors. But the real power of our framework comes from what we can do to further understand and analyze players. So, representing players as embeddings, we can hold, for example, an opponent constant, change the player of interest, and see how the response changes, which is what I've done here on the left. Holding Nadal, the opponent, as a constant, we can see Djokovic's response changing compared to Dimitrov. Dimitrov does not touch Nadal's forehand side because, again, like Thiem, he has a single-handed backhand. He does not want anything to do with the ultra-spinny Nadal forehand, especially on a clay court. I can also explore what happens at different scores. So on the right-hand set of diagrams, top left, love, original score, response map with the ground truth indicated. And then I can also explore what happens if the score were to be love 40 or 40 love, and their respective speeds. So this gives us a great deal of insight into how player response changes with different opponents, different players, different scenarios. Now, the real sort of important bit here is understanding errors. So I've got two examples here, both of them occur when an error is, both of them are situations when an error occurs. I can sample from the imitation model and show what the model thinks the true branch location should be alongside the speed. And here I've sort of kept it quite simple. In both cases, the speed is way off. On the left-hand error, Djokovic is hitting way, way faster than he should be, than he normally would be. And on the other one, he hits it into net because he's hitting the ball too slow. Now some fun stuff. We can analyze the embeddings that the model learns. So specifically, if we look to the left, really good example, the one that I like to point out is the similarity between Thiem and Wawrinka. This hasn't gone unnoticed by tennis pundits. A lot of people have noticed that they've got very similar styles of play. Solid, solid, solid backhands, solid forehands, great ground strokes. Over here on the right, more fun stuff with hypothetical scenarios, such as given a shot, how would Djokovic play against himself? How would Nadal play against himself? And the corresponding sort of bounce maps and speeds. Future work, there's a bunch of interesting stuff we can do to really sort of extend this and improve the experience for the fans, especially on Infosys platform. So yeah, I'm just going to leave this up here, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, nice work. I feel like I'm kind of asking the same question of all three papers so far, but like, you know, it's cool, techniques to apply, seems like an appropriate case for machine learning. But what are the predictive implications, right? If I'm Rafael Nadal, I'm in the elevator, or I'm Haralabab making sports bets or something, right? Like, what do you tell me in 30 seconds that you've learned from this data about like how I can win more bets or win more matches?
So the focus here was actually to improve coaching. So the idea is that you know, coaching isn't sort of equally accessible. Great coaching isn't equally accessible to all players. So if we can incorporate this into a sort of a player portal platform where players can go and see sort of, here's the error you made. This is where we think you should have hit. So basically work on your execution here. Your execution is significantly subpar sort of in this style or category of shots. Go and work on that. And the goal in part is to identify those kind of situations. Yeah.
Do you presume that you know better than the player? Because maybe if I have like if I'm really bad at defending Nadal's backhand, right, then I'm not making a certain shot, but it's actually optimal for me, given my limitations. Or I mean, like, what have you found about like, where's like a player who's doing something wrong, for example, that you could help coach?
Well, I think. For example, if you take the Nadal example, if you've got a single-handed backhand, you keep hitting to Nadal's forehand, that's going to be reflected in an imitation model, right? So the idea is, if you were to hit, you know, to Nadal's backhand side, that goes against the grain. That's, you know, way outside what you usually do. We can identify that and go, okay, at this point, you know, you've hit Nadal's backhand, you've ended up winning the point. Maybe you've done that 5 times out of 50 in a match, right? It doesn't fit with the imitation. It's not what you're doing something differently, but it's good. You know, carry on doing that.
Yeah, really interesting research. So my question, a little more technical. I understand generative adversarial networks, you know, at a high level. Mm-hmm. But on a previous slide, you had the architecture. Yep. And you had the generator, you have a discriminator, and then you had a third component. So yep. I understand. So the generator is saying, hey, given a situation and given a player of interest, here's what I'm guessing this is what they would do. And the discriminator knows what they actually do in practice, mm-hmm. and says, no, that's not what Nadal would do. Yeah. And then the generator learns back and forth. What was that third
So that's
offshoot.
something that it's a historical context encoder. The idea is that we're not. I'm assuming tennis is an MDP. In fact, it really isn't. So the idea is that can we encode some of that historical context? In this case, for example, assume I can match. Assume I'm looking at a sort of incoming shot. I can match it against sort of some of the previous shots this player has hit in particular, and just provide a sort of a compact representation of that to the generator.
Okay, I'm gonna have to study that a little more. Okay, and referencing Nate's question, like I think this model is like am I using this word right? Normative, right? You're asking like what would a player do, and then you're finding examples of like sort of out of what's expected,
Yeah.
and focusing on those. So maybe it's just a suggestion, but if you combine this would, I think, answer Nate's question. You combine this with like outcome variables. Did you win this point or not? Or did you gain an advantage on the next rally, the next volley? Mm-hmm. Then you have a prescriptive model. And I think that would be that would be super valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the way forward. Something that's not on sort of the future work is actually to apply a full reinforcement learning treatment to the problem, to say this is the shot you should be hitting to win against this player.
My question is also about the future. So you take advantage of the Hawkeye data clearly in this whole work. Mm-hmm. What is the future there? Like, what is your wishful thinking in terms of data that might become available that will improve your capabilities even further?
What I think would be super interesting is to see whether we can capture sort of some of the non-tracking components of tennis. So, something in my experience that I've seen at Wimbledon, for example, is the sun. Wimbledon's open roof for the most part. The sun can come on, it can sort of say shine on half the court. If we can capture that and represent that in some way for a model, right? Basically, does that end up changing outcome and how a player is going to shot make? So I think sort of looking at some of these external non-tracking based factors could be a really interesting way forward.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Coming back to sort of the points about what might you use this for, at the end you said you can use this to improve the experience for fans. Mm-hmm. Could you say a little bit more about what you're thinking along those lines?
So this one is specifically, let me go back, there you go, the hypothetical scenarios, right? So how would a player have done basically against themselves, or can we, given a particular shot, can we swap out the player of interest and the opponent to see how different players, for example, would play in that situation? So if we've got a Djokovic-Nadal final, can we swap that out, right? Keep the shot the same, keep everything the same, throw Federer and Dimitrov in there and see what happens. So that's sort of the idea behind that.
Interesting. And can you remind me what the title of your talk was again?
It's Thinking the GOAT, Imitating Tennis Styles.
So I was waiting for the GOAT in this. Does this tell me who the GOAT is?
Well, the GOAT, the one GOAT in here. Oh gosh, I have to go all the way back now. Is anyone into ancient Greek? Truly, because the symbols at the bottom, alpha, iota, and G, goat in ancient Greek. So that's where the goat is. I thought many people, yeah.
Thanks.